to focus on the 3 waves of volunteers. So that's the ones I'm going to be talking about tonight, are the 3 waves. And this took a long time to get all the pieces. It's scattered throughout the Convoluted Universe books, as I got little pieces of what it was all about. And then it's only been over the last year or so I began to get more pieces that ties the whole story to the Keepers of the Garden is where we had the first information about the seeding of the planet Earth and where we all came from. And then the Custodians is the story of my 25 years working with the UFOs and ETs. They expand upon this information because they said you must know the story of how life began on Earth. So I'm going to have to go back together. Well, in the beginning of life on Earth, they said there are councils. There are councils over planets. There are councils over solar systems. There are councils over galaxies. So they keep watch over all of the planets. And you can imagine what a job that would be. They keep track of everything. Councils are the history of all of the planets. They said when a planet reaches the point when it can support life, that's a very momentous time in the history of that planet. And at that time, they'd have to decide what kind of life are we going to introduce on that planet. The call went out. Earth is in trouble. We need souls to volunteer and come and help. Will you help Earth? And I've had many, many sessions when some of them are at the meetings they're holding in the spirit world.
So I wanted people to hear this because when I'm doing readings, I can see who are the volunteers. I call them the healers. I can also see the healers that are, I also call Uranians. And Uranians have not frequented here on Earth. It's important to know if you're a healer, and it's also important to know if you're a Uranian, because it explains a lot of pain and anguish when you're here on Earth. Uranians feel they're not as emotionally driven. That doesn't mean they're not emotional, they're not compassionate, they're not feeling. It just means they don't make decisions solely based on emotions, specifically around their childhood. They're very logical and practical. They kind of feel like Spock, you know, from Star Trek. And they also feel like they can't relate to humans, that they find humans to be overly emotional, and they feel a bit alienated. Anyways, let's continue. And where do you fit in? I like it when I look at people's birth charts because I can see where they do. It's okay if you're not a volunteer. If you're not a volunteer, then you may be a follower. You may be an apprentice. There's all types of roles. But definitely, if you're born in this day and age, you're one of something to save the Earth.
First wave, I'm second wave. Now it makes sense. I finally understand. Never been here before, and that are not stuck on the wheel of karma. Those are the ones we're going to have to bring in. Pure souls. Never been contaminated by Earth before. So that was what they decided to do. And the call went out for volunteers. And I've had hundreds of these sessions, and I've written about them in the books about, I'd find one here, one there, and that's why. Now, how can you explain this if it happens again and again and again? They go to 2 places. Some of them were ETs, they don't like that term, on other planets, spaceships, other planets, other dimensions. Some of them lived in places where they were light bodies. They didn't even have a body. Imagine how to get that far advanced and then to volunteer to come down here. And they have never been on Earth before because they've always lived on other planets. Now, how can you explain this if it happens again?
That is so cool because I did a past life regression with a client. This is the only time this has ever happened. And this person literally, and it was a guy, and this person literally could not go back into, he kept saying, I'm floating around in the sky, I'm floating around in the trees, I'm following this little girl. So I seem to be floating up and hovering over this little girl. I feel like I have to protect her. So he was a guide. And so he went into he wasn't actually like an ET. He was one of those ones that she's mentioning, just a light, an energy. This is
before because they've always lived on other planets and other dimensions. Then we have some who have never been anything. They had never left God before. And this is tremendous when I have these sessions with these people. Would you imagine what a shock it would be to these souls? They're so pure and they're so unaffected by our junk here to come into this life. Go back to God, they call it the source.
Okay, I've always struggled with this because I've always called it source too. Where do you get your messages, Holly? Where do you get your downloads? Where do you get this information? I always say source. And then I just started trying to think of other words that would, like Akashic Records or channeling, but no, I'm going back to source because that's what I've always called it. That's what it is.
The whole section in the last book on what God and what the source is.
Oh my gosh, so do I. I wrote a book in 2019. It was supposed to come out for 2020. There it is. And that's my first, literally the first 13 questions is about God. What is God? And I was talking to Source, and Source was giving me the answers. That's one of my favorite parts, actually, of the book. If you're interested, you can get it on Amazon.
So these people went back to lives, which I didn't think was possible to never have a life anywhere.
These are the three waves of volunteers.
I wouldn't have believed it. But they were with God. And they were very, very happy. They didn't want to go. Because when they leave, they said it's this feeling of separateness. And it's very traumatic. They don't like it. Things, and I'm thinking, well, you must have left because here I'm talking to this body laying on the bed. I said, well, why did you decide to leave? They said, we heard the call. And even when the ETs, all of this, they always say the same thing. We heard the call because they've come in at different times. And this was the experiment to see because Earth was really needed help. The first wave would be those born right at the end of the Second World War, right about the time I said when they discovered that we dropped the bomb, we didn't need the energy. We couldn't handle it. That's when the new souls began coming in, which I used to say 50s. My daughter says, don't be too strict on these ages because we don't know. Some people tell me they're in their 60s and they think they are one of the forerunners because they fit the qualifications. But like it. They're very unhappy. Family, good jobs, but they don't like Earth. They don't like the negativity. They want to go home. The second wave came later. Julie, what do you think? It's about 20s and 30s years old now, are what I call the generators, the antennas, the channelers. They're here to just be. They're here to channel energy. They will affect anybody they're around. They said you could walk through a mall, a crowded place, and affect everyone that you walked by. It's from the energy generating to do. These people, the second wave, are very gentle. They're usually in the background. If they do get married, I found some that find another soul like themselves. They usually don't want children because they said to have children creates karma. They don't want karma. They want to do their job and get out of here. That's what people say. I know I'm first wave. I never wanted to be here. And they tell me, some of them say, I remember standing in the kitchen talking to my mother when I was about 3 or 4 years old, saying, I want to go home. And they didn't understand what they meant. Well, the third wave are the new children. These are the ones you call the indigo, the new children coming in that are considered the hope of the world. They're the gift of the future. They are coming in with everything in place. See, as we go through going into the new earth and everything, our DNA is being changed so that we can adapt to all the changes that are happening now. These children are coming in with everything in place. Everything is there. They don't have to have any changes made. They are ready and they're willing to go. This is why there are